No one will ever want you, Richard said, handing me divorce papers like he was passing me a receipt. He took the house, the savings, the car. I got a suitcase, and 17 notebooks filled with dreams he spent a decade calling cute. That morning, I was elbow deep in a dumpster behind a foreclosed mansion, hunting for broken furniture to fix and sell. And then a woman in heels walked up and asked, "Excuse me, are you Sophia Hartfield?" Just like that. Everything cracked open. But this story doesn't start with an inheritance. It starts with being systematically erased. And what happens when you decide not to stay gone? The leg of the broken chair dug into my side as I reached deeper into the dumpster. I wasn't looking for anything special, just wood sturdy enough to sand down and maybe flip online. My stomach growled, but I'd gotten used to that. What I wasn't used to was the sharp click of heels behind me. I turned, still holding the chair leg like it might double as a weapon, and saw her, perfectly pressed suit, sharp eyes, holding a leather folder like she had walked off the cover of Forbes and into the ruins of my life. "Excuse me," she said carefully. "Are you Sophia Hartfield?" I wiped my hand on my jeans, leaving a smear of grime across denim already past salvation. "If you're here to repossess anything, this chair leg is all I've got." She didn't flinch. "I'm Victoria Chen. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Theodore Hartfield." I blinked. The name hit like a slap. That man hadn't spoken to me in 10 years. "Your uncle left you everything. 3 months ago. I had a husband, a house, and an architecture degree gathering dust. Now I had a garbage bag full of junk. And, apparently, $47 million. Life's got one hell of a sense of humor. The Mercedes was too quiet, too smooth, too far from the woman who had just climbed out of a dumpster. I sat stiff in the back seat, hands still stained in places I couldn't scrub clean. Outside, the city rolled past in slow motion. Inside, memories I had buried under years of silence started to surface. It had all begun with charm. Richard had walked into my life like a man who knew the ending and was gracious enough to bring me along for the story. He said he loved how passionate I was about design, how my eyes lit up when I talked about cities. He called my sketches brilliant, until he didn't. After we got married, those same sketches became cute distractions. He suggested I take time off to adjust to married life. Then he discouraged me from taking the licensing exam, said the stress would make me miserable. When I landed a few freelance clients, he'd suddenly book us out of town. Forget to tell me until the day before. Emails vanished from my inbox. Interview calls never came. I knew it wasn't chance. I just didn't want to admit it. 17 notebooks. That's how many I filled in the dark. Drawings I never showed him. Ideas hidden beneath the bed, tucked between old textbooks. Like I was ashamed of wanting more than a curated life in the suburbs. He cheated. I left. No fight. No screaming. Just one suitcase. Those notebooks. And a silence that had become heavier than any betrayal. I used to dream of building cities. Richard made dreaming feel like an inconvenience. And the worst part? I spent years apologizing for existing. And I believed I should. The house didn't look like a home. Not at first. It was a statement. A 5-story brownstone carved in glass and stone. Proud without shouting. As the driver opened the door, I hesitated on the threshold like a stray animal being invited into somewhere warm. Margaret greeted me with the kind of tenderness that comes from memory, not pity. She looked older than I remembered, but her voice was the same, low, certain, soft enough to carry you through grief if needed. She didn't say much, just smiled and motioned me to follow. We climbed floor after floor until we reached the 5th. "He built this for you," she said. At first, I thought she was mistaken. But then she opened the door, and the world I'd abandoned was waiting inside. Wall-to-wall windows spilled in soft morning light. Drafting tables stood ready, a high-end computer, still humming. Shelves lined with sketchbooks, ink, mechanical pencils. And on the corkboard above the desk, tacked carefully in the center, was the very first design I ever submitted in school. The one that made Theodore call me brilliant before anyone else dared to. He made this 8 years ago. Margaret whispered. 8 years. That was the same year Richard told me to stop wasting time drawing. The same year I stopped believing I'd ever get to be the woman I wanted to be. Theodore knew. He knew I wasn't okay. He didn't push, didn't call, didn't try to fix me. He just built this space and waited. Quiet faith, like architecture, measured, intentional, patient. He didn't forgive me, but he never stopped believing I'd come back. He left the light on. All I had to do was turn the key. They were waiting for me. The moment I stepped into the boardroom, it was obvious. Suits too sharp, eyes too polite, smiles stretched thin like pre-written conclusions. 8 people sat around the table, all older, mostly male, all of them looking at me like a glitch in the system. Carmichael, silver-haired and smug, leaned back in his chair like he owned the oxygen in the room. He spoke before I had fully taken my seat. We're all here to ensure Hartfield architecture continues to meet the highest standards, given your unusual qualifications. Perhaps you'd like to walk us through your professional portfolio? I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled a worn notebook from my bag, flipped it open to the page marked with a red tab, and slid it across the table. The room shifted. What started as amused dismissal turned into silence. The drawing was meticulous, an eco-integrated urban complex, complete with roof gardens, passive solar structures, smart glass integrations. I had designed it 2 years into my marriage, at night, under kitchen light, while Richard slept. I saw Carmichael's eyes narrow as others leaned closer. Before anyone could recover, Victoria spoke. Effective today, all staff will be asked to sign new contracts reflecting updated leadership and direction. Severance will be offered to those who choose not to align with that vision. The old guard stiffened. Victoria's voice didn't waver. If progress threatens you, the door's right there. I met their stares one by one and said quietly, "This company was never built on fear. It was built on innovation. If you're afraid of being led by someone with fire instead of comfort, maybe you're in the wrong room." I walked out of that meeting without waiting for their applause or approval. I wasn't here to win them over. I was here to rebuild what my uncle started, and no one was going to do that for me but me. The room was full. The Anderson team, 5 executives from one of the most innovative tech firms in the country, sat expectantly, coffee cups steaming, small talk fading as the clock ticked toward 10 m. My laptop wouldn't open the file. I tried again, and again. Slides gone, images shattered, script broken into symbols. It wasn't just corrupted, it had been sabotaged. Behind me, Jacob leaned in, voice low. "Carmichael borrowed your laptop yesterday." The room was waiting. I had 20 seconds to decide whether to panic or pivot. I stood, closed the laptop, walked to the whiteboard. "Mr. Anderson, you said you wanted a building that tells a story. Let me show you how it breathes." I picked up a marker and began sketching. Slowly at first, then with rhythm. The building's flow, its seasonal light adjustment, the cooling system that mimicked natural wind tunnels, the rooftop gardens that recycled water, each line a beat, each detail a breath. When I paused, the board was a full system, alive, dynamic, cohesive. Anderson stood. This is exactly what we're looking for." He extended his hand. "When can you start?" The room burst into motion. Contracts, signatures, congratulations. I barely heard them. My heartbeat was louder. Back at the office that night, Jacob handed me a thin folder. It was from Theodore's locked cabinet. Inside were fragments of my life, a newspaper clipping from a student exhibit, my college transcript, a court document from my divorce, and a letter. "Sophia, you were never forgotten. You just needed time to remember how brightly you were built to burn." I held the letter with shaking hands. Richard tried to convince me that passion made me fragile, but it was passion that pulled me out of the dark. when nothing else believed in me. It did. And that was enough to begin again. The buzz of my phone barely registered over the sound of Emma laughing from across the studio. She'd just wrapped her first client presentation, a community housing project she'd dreamed up and designed herself. I watched her glow, knowing exactly what that kind of spark used to feel like. Then I looked down. Guess you landed on your feet. We should talk. I stared at the message. For a long time, I didn't even blink, as if reading it again might change who it was from. He didn't stop there. By the end of the week, he had messaged Emma, under a fake account, then under his own. Then came the email from his attorney, a formal request to claim a portion of my inheritance. His argument? That everything I knew, I learned while married to him, and he was therefore entitled to compensation. It wasn't about the money, not for him. It was about seeing me succeed without him, about watching me breathe without permission. I didn't cry. I didn't answer. I picked up the phone and called Victoria. I want to go to war, I said, but I want to do it clean. We gathered evidence. I found the journals, 10 years of ink and erasure, all the ways he made me small, the notes he left on mirrors, the silence he weaponized, the compliments laced with correction. The night he scheduled our anniversary dinner, the same hour I had my first interview, he thought he broke me, but all he did was push me deep enough into myself to write everything down. You used to control what I wore, what I ate, what I thought, but you don't control that I'm still here. You're not afraid I made it. You're afraid I don't need you to. The courtroom smelled like varnished wood and expensive suits. He came in flanked by lawyers, confident, composed, already preening for the win. I didn't speak to him. Didn't look. Victoria took the floor first. She was precise, surgical, journal excerpts, emails to his friends mocking me, testimony from the therapist I saw in secret during our 3rd year of marriage. But it was my voice that cracked the room open. I stood with the journal in my hands, flipped to the page I'd folded back 100 times, but never read aloud. Not even to myself. Tonight, I apologized for asking to apply for a job. He said I embarrassed him. I believed I had. There was no noise in the courtroom, no breath, just that sentence hanging there like smoke. The judge didn't just throw out his claim. He warned Richard that another stunt like this could open him to charges of malicious intent. I stepped outside to a wall of press. I didn't run. I didn't hide. The man who once called me worthless, I said calmly, has just been declared untrustworthy by the state of New York. The video went viral before I made it back to the car. By morning, there were women, dozens, writing in, sharing stories, naming him. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I exhaled. I didn't need to win for revenge. I needed space to breathe. He's not the story anymore. He's a footnote in mine. The numbers hit the table like a gavel. $300 million. Half the boardroom held its breath. Patricia's voice was calm as she slid the folder across the polished wood, revealing the offer from Marcus Chen, a full acquisition of Hartfield Architecture. 51% of the shares were mine. If I agreed, I'd walk away with more than $150 million. Personally. For a long second, I said nothing. I looked around the room, at the team who had stood beside me through chaos and rebirth, at Emma's name glowing from the latest community project in Brooklyn, at the logo on the wall Theodore once traced with his hands. Then I pushed the folder back. I wasn't born to sell what someone else died protecting. Patricia's lips curved into a knowing smile. She reached beneath the table and laid out a second envelope. Another clause, hidden in a final codicil of Theodore's will. If Sophia declines any acquisition offer over $100 million in her first year, she receives a personal gift of $30 million. No conditions. No strings. Just proof that principle is worth more than price. And then came the box. Velvet-lined, tucked with a note in Eleanor Hartfield's handwriting, and inside it, the ring she wore when she designed her first public library. Later that night, Jacob knelt in the studio. Theodore built for me. No grand speech. Just a question and a promise. He didn't ask me to belong to him. He asked to belong beside me. I didn't reject 300 million because I didn't want it. I rejected it because what we were building couldn't be bought. Not now. Not ever. The ribbon fluttered in the autumn breeze as Emma stepped forward, scissors in hand, trembling just enough for it to matter. The crowd outside the new Brooklyn Community Library applauded as she cut the ribbon clean through. Her name announced not as an assistant or intern, but as lead architect. I stood off to the side, watching her eyes well up, not because she needed validation, but because for the first time in her life, someone built something that made her feel seen, and she had done the same for others. 3 months ago, we launched the Public Architecture Initiative. Jacob and I pooled the remainder of Theodore's legacy into a nationwide effort. Libraries, community centers, transitional housing projects, not for cities chasing prestige, but for neighborhoods the map forgot. Everyone deserves to live in beauty. Not just the wealthy, not just the lucky. That had been Theodore's dream, and now it was ours. After the ceremony, a producer approached me. Young, direct. The kind of person who didn't ask if your story was ready, just if she could be the one to tell it. She wanted a documentary series. About the work. About me. I said yes. With one condition. I'm not telling this story out of revenge. I'm telling it so that someone sitting in the dark believes they still matter. Weeks later, the teaser trailer went viral, which must have reached him. I recognized the number, but didn't hesitate to answer. He asked for an apology, said I had slandered him by association, said his name had been dragged through the mud. I reminded him I'd never spoken his name. If he saw himself in the man being questioned in the film, maybe he should ask why. Then I hung up and instructed Victoria to issue one final cease and desist. He never called again. I didn't build buildings. I built belief. Not just for people like Emma. For people like me. Once told to be smaller, quieter, easier to dismiss. No one remembers the hands that tried to bury you. They remember what you grew into once you stopped apologizing for being alive. The rooftop smelled like lavender and rain-washed brick. String lights shimmered above our heads, like constellations carefully placed by someone who understood that even the stars needed structure. Jacob stood across from me in a dark gray suit, eyes full of quiet certainty. His hands never once trembled. Margaret dabbed at her cheeks beside Emma, who looked radiant in a soft slate blue dress that she had designed herself. Patricia stepped forward, her voice warm as she unfolded a single sheet of paper. It was Theodore's final letter. If you're reading this, it means the plan worked. You made it. Now build the things I didn't have time for. Love each other like I loved Eleanor, boldly, stubbornly, with no room for half measures. And for the love of architecture, please don't name your child after me. The room broke into laughter through tears. I felt my chest swell with something deeper than joy. It was anchoring. We kissed beneath the frame of the rooftop studio, the same beams Theodore once traced for me with his weathered hands. In the corner, Emma captured it on film. For once, I didn't flinch at being seen. A month later, I stood behind a podium in an auditorium filled with folding chairs and restless caps and gowns. My alma mater had invited me to speak at commencement. I hesitated before saying yes. Not because I was unsure of the words, but because I finally knew what they had cost. I used to have an architecture degree. I began, but no blueprint for my own life. I thought knowing how to build meant I knew how to live. I didn't. Now I understand. Every structure begins with a foundation. And for us, that foundation must be the belief that we deserve to stand here. We deserve to take up space. We deserve to try again. The applause was quiet at first. Then it surged. Some of the faculty even stood. That night, I returned to the rooftop alone. The city blinked beneath me. Soft. Distant. Alive. Behind me. The door clicked gently shut. I looked down at my hands. One wore Eleanor's ring, passed down like a blueprint for courage. The other wore Jacob's, still warm. I didn't speak to the moon or the skyline. I didn't need to. But I said it anyway. Just for myself. I am no longer someone else's unfinished project. I am the architect of second chances.